All right, welcome to Shop Talk Podcast, where the talk is shop and the shop is Santa Rosa. Still working on that slogan. It's pretty bad. Today, I'm super excited. It's actually like sort of our first real guest, because the first episode was just me, Sarah, and Brittany from the CMR team.
Okay.
Introducing the podcast. So now you're like the first real guest that's come on the podcast.
I feel so honored.
I know, so it's got to be
That's
really,
awesome.
really good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, then we're gonna have to stop. So
No pressure.
I'm super excited because Animal Control Officer Kelli Simpson is one of the first people I met when I started working at the county.
Yes.
And I want to take an opportunity to just say a big thank you, because when I started working here, I was totally kind of dedicated to the animal shelter, and Officer Simpson just really took the time to teach me a lot of stuff and trusted me a lot when she probably didn't need to, for sure. And so we made some really cool educational videos and stuff, and I just want to take a second to thank her and the whole animal control team, because they have really done a great job in bearing with me as I've created content over the past year and a half. And they've just got a really special place in my heart, because I think animal control is very misunderstood a lot of the times, and people don't understand the dedication that these ACOs have to not only the animal community in Santa Rosa, but the residents and their interactions with their animals and their interactions with animals across our great county. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Excited
Our
to have
pleasure.
you.
Our group of ACOs is top notch. You know, we put the fun in dysfunctional family, and we just have a good time with it, because, you know, there's a lot of times when if you're not laughing, you'd be crying, you know, when you see some of the stuff that we see from day to day. And so when we can kind of band together and be rowdy with each other and have fun with it, that at least takes the sting out of some of the stuff that we deal with.
Yeah. So I just want to start off first, kind of, can you tell me a little bit about kind of your personal career, how you came to be in animal control? You were in the military, retired military, right?
Yes.
I think a lot of people don't realize that our ACOs most of them are either prior service military or prior law enforcement, or they used to be in EMS or some sort of other 911 sort of first responder service, whether it be fire or whatever. So can you talk a little bit about just like your career and what kind of brought you here?
You know, I grew up in a life of service. My dad was a police officer for 30 years. Then I joined the military, and I was in for 16 years. So I took the early out when they were downsizing. And I was a master sergeant. So my entire career at that point was serving the airmen under me and making sure that they had everything that they needed and speaking up for them when they needed things. And, you know, in working with, you know, some of the disparaged population and stuff like that, you tend to be their voice, you know, as a healthcare provider, and as an EMT, you're speaking up for somebody who can't talk. Yeah. So it was kind of a natural transition to go to animals and be their voice when they can't tell you what's going on, and you just try to figure out the best thing that you can do to, you know, make them healthy and happy again. But a friend of mine she ran a rescue in California. She calls me up one day and she's like, "Hey, I need your help." And I was like, okay, I was game for it. And she's like, she was a deputy. She's like, yeah, we raided a meth house, and there's 9 to 13 Great Danes inside of there, and I need your help getting them out. Jeez. And I was like, game on, where do I sign up? And that was my first taste of what a little bit of what animal control did at that point. And I was hook, line, and sinker in love with it, because it was totally different, but the same in so many manners, you know, and that's kind of what it was, just a great way to go.
Yeah. I mean, you hit on some for me. I mean, I'm also a military guy. I'm an Army guy. And to me, in leadership, my definition of leadership has always been, well, not always, I guess, from learning from great leaders has developed to be, leadership is just simply an opportunity to serve more people. And I think it's interesting that you've taken that kind of perspective and route to serving the underserved and the animals that I think are in our county, and the voiceless. I mean, they don't really have a voice in the whole process.
Exactly.
Of being just existing in our area. So that's a super neat and unique kind of way transition into that. And so now after being an animal, how long have you been at ACO now?
6 years.
6 years. Wow. So it's coming up on another sort of military-ish type.
It is. You know, they kind of say, you know, the burnout rate for our career field is anything. If you can get over the 5-year mark, you're a lifer. And you know, it's one of those things where I kind of hit that mile mark, and I was like, this is still fun. I still love it. You know, there's those frustrating days like any other job in the world, but I wouldn't change what I'm doing. I get up looking forward to the next bucket of crazy that's going to come at me. Yeah.
What would you say is your favorite aspect to your job? Now, after 6 years, has it changed? Is it the same, or is it different, or what?
I think as I've been doing it longer and I'm starting to do more of the investigating and the actual building of crime profiles and getting that to the state's attorney and building cases where I can actually enact the laws that I looked up to the other people that had been doing it a lot longer than me doing. It was kind of an eye-opening thing. I always knew I wanted to do that, but now I'm to the point where I'm at that level where I'm able to, you know, bring those cases home and, you know, and package them up for the state's attorney and make it a slam dunk so that we can get some justice for all those involved. Yeah.
Well, you've certainly done that a lot, right? And you've certainly educated the public a lot. I got a surprise for you here. Watch this. Let's see if it works.
We come out there and care about those animals.
So this is a video we did a while back, about a year ago.
You know, possible victims. Just showing them that we do have to, you know, we do have to be there to take care of everybody, not just one person over the other. And you know, so many times I've had somebody say, "Oh, I couldn't do your jobs. I love animals too much." That's exactly why we do this job. You know, when we come out to a cruelty case where you see animals that are just walking sacks of bones, that is, you know, the reason why I'm there is because I love those animals and I want to get them to a better situation.
I remember that was one of the first things I think I'd been working for.
You were brand new.
Maybe a couple months at the most, and I said, hey, I want to do an ACO kind of ride along, and we did. You and Officer Thalen, and it was great. It was my first kind of look, how you said, it was my first look into animal control, and the biggest thing that I got out of it was the dedication to the people, not just the animals, to the people. Of course, the animals. I mean, people. I think we've talked about this. We were just on the radio like last week, right? We were talking about how animal control officers in movies and stuff have been labeled the dog catchers and all this.
Disney did not do us any favors.
No, I love Disney, but come on, you really messed us up. But you know, at the same time, that's what those kind of educational campaigns are for. And one thing that stuck out to me too was I had gone with Samantha Thalen to a house that she continually goes to feed an elderly lady's dog. Goes out of her way, sometimes in her free time, to make sure that the dogs that are living on her property that may or may not be able to, that she might not be able to take care of, she's going out there and she's feeding them all the time. Just above and beyond stuff that people don't realize that you guys do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And quite frankly, you know, you get these Facebook warriors that, you know, like to bash the homeless, and they'll be like, that person doesn't deserve an animal. And I can tell you that I have seized more animals out of $500,000 homes than I ever have from a homeless person. Wow. That animal is often that person's entire world. That animal will eat before they will. They will make whatever they need to happen to have that dog always with them, because that's their best friend. Yeah. So there's been many times when I go out into some of the encampment areas and I'm taking food, I'm taking the waterproof containers out there so that the food doesn't get moldy, or, you know, beds. runners, whatever I can take to, help those folks out, because I would much rather that dog be loved by its owner than be in a kennel somewhere that's, just degrading in mental status when it just really needs to be where it belongs.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing. It's a slew of misconceptions. One, that animal control officers somehow don't love animals. I think you can't do this job unless you love animals.
If I had $1 for every time I was like, "Are you going to kill it?" No, I'm not going to kill it.
That's the other thing is that our job at our county animal shelter, it's simply a transitionary place. Animal control officers are tasked with assessing different cases and finding out if dogs are in bad situations or hurt or sick or whatever it might be, or strays, and bringing them to the shelter if there's space, but getting them out of the shelter as quickly as humanly possible. I mean, so many ACOs also help within the adoption process, I think, and throughout the process, and our surge med staff and administering vaccines and different things, microchipping. And so people think sometimes that the shelter is just a catch-all for all these dogs, but no, you guys are really just trying to transition them out of that.
Exactly. Space. Before we take on those big cases, like when we talked about the 52 beagles and the single wide trailer, I had my contacts that were in Southeast Alabama, because that's where I did animal control first, after we got out of California. And so I still have my network there. So, I'm reaching out to that group of folks along with Tara, who does the rescue coordinating. We're reaching out to all of our people, and we were contacting people all over the U.S., and we were moving dogs like it was nobody's business. And that's the only way that a shelter that's been deemed no-kill can operate. You have to have an out to move animals. If not, then you have to have the most amazing foster network, or, some type of way to get them marketed to get them out quickly, because a dog only degrades while it's in a kennel, or any animal in general. But dogs really take that emotional and intellectual hit that it just makes them go in a downhill spiral, and it's hard to pull them back out once they get to that point. Yeah. And then we're having to make hard decisions, and that's not fair to the dog.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Beagle case we just had?
Sure. Yeah. No, it was one of those. It was not even on our radar. And the individual was a owner who just was over his head. He had a medical emergency and was in the hospital for some time. He asked a friend to take care of his animals, and next thing we know, the friend opens up the door and is like, "Oh my God!" He said he had a few dogs, not 52 dogs. And so that was it caught us all off guard, because there's a lot of tucked in areas of Santa Rosa County that we may never show our paint to, because we don't get called out there, or it's just not on the radar for a problem area. Yeah. We do try to, show off the paint as much as possible, but there's a lot of, nooks and crannies in this county. And so when we got the call, we went out there, and Officer Pennell calls me back, and he's like, "Dear God, what, now what?" And so it's really hard, because you have to have space for all those animals. So when you get a big case, you can't have a kennel that's already 120% full, and then it's like you have to make those hard decisions of what do we do next, that kind of a thing. And so that's when we're really reaching out to the higher ups to give us backing to get creative. Yeah. And thankfully, they allow us some pretty good freedoms as far as our supervision is concerned. They let us think our way out of problems, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, if you haven't heard it already, Santa Rosa County Animal Shelter is a no-kill shelter.
Correct.
Now, what that means is 90% of our outcomes, meaning like from the pathway from beginning to end for our animals, has to be 90% or above for us to retain a no-kill shelter status. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, full transparency, dogs do get euthanized at the shelter.
They do.
And there are illnesses and stuff that happens in the shelter. And sometimes, and when we released our outcome stats, you'll see stuff that says something like death within care but not euthanasia sort of thing. And so, there's times where ACOs roll out to cases, and there's an animal or a cat or something, and it's nearing the end right in that moment, and there's nothing that they can do. that number still counts against our
Yes.
outcomes number.
Yes.
So if we have to euthanize, it's because of either really, really bad injury or illness, or extreme behavioral issues tracked over a series of months with multiple behavior assessments. Shout out to Samantha Pope, our behavioral tech,
Yes.
who does all this great work.
Yes.
And so, and it's really far and few between. So it doesn't mean that it never happens at the shelter. It just means that, I think I was looking back over the last year, and I think over the several I was looking at the last few years, and our numbers have not only been at 90, they've been at like 93, 94, then like 92, then 94. And so it's extremely difficult because we're not a rescue, and in order to just function, we have to be at like max capacity basically all the time.
All the time.
And people ask, why can't you take this dog? Why can't you take this cat? Why can't you? We have no space because we're a no-kill shelter, and we don't have. We're not just euthanizing animals all the time. There's no space, So I just want to put that out there for those people that if you're interacting with somebody at the shelter or you're interacting with an ACO, they're truly doing everything that they possibly can. If they say we can't take it at the shelter, it's just because there's no physical space there. There's dogs in offices all the time. It's crazy, It's just always full. So.
Yeah, and one of the things too is that as the citizens bring in injured or sick animals, those numbers count against us too, not just what ACOs bring in,
Right.
or what happens within the shelter. So it's a very big number that we battle daily. There's times when we're going to bust that. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But we do everything in our power to never bust that number because, that's the last thing we want to do is just be killing for space. And that's not what we got into this business for.
Right. And those numbers are tracked over the year, so you have to maintain the 90% or above for the entire year. So sometimes you see, numbers kind of go up and down a little bit. But, just huge kudos, huge shout out to the entire ACO team. And to include Tesla, who is,
Yes.
if you don't know, this blew my mind the first time I heard it. Tesla's the only dispatcher for animal control.
Yeah.
She fields every call that comes through, at least like for the animal control side, representing, just eclipsing 200,000 residents now.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
the amount of calls that she fields, the amount of different things that she has to deal with is crazy. I don't know how she does it.
Well, and she's kind of a 1-2 punch because not only is it ACO Appreciation Week, it's also Dispatcher Week.
That's
and
right,
so
yeah.
she is an officer and she's our dispatcher. So she's double billeted, and she's phenomenal. She keeps us all in line, and she's keeping track of us and taking care of us and watching us. There's a big safety component to this job where if she doesn't hear from us for a little bit, she's like, "Hey, you good?"
Yeah.
She's checking in on us, making sure that we're not out there injured. Because anything can happen in this job. I've been shot at. I've been tried to be run over with vehicles. It happens. A lot of people see us like they do law enforcement. If they don't like law enforcement, they sure as heck aren't going to like us.
Yeah.
So
let's talk a little bit about what do residents really need to know about the status of animal control in our county. There's I wrote down some stuff. There's all kinds of issues. There's overpopulation. There's misconceptions that we're battling, like we were talking about.
Right.
There's lack of spay, neuter, and microchipping, which is leading to more overpopulation. Mm-hmm. And so what do you see is maybe the biggest issue when it comes to animal control, and how we can kind of combat that as residents?
One of the biggest things is you have to think there's 7 of us ACOs versus the entire county.
Yeah.
And we have an officer on 24/7. So at least one of those 7 is at home sleeping when we're all at work. So that leaves us 6 of us to cover all the crazy. The more and more people that come in, we're going to need more positions. So if you're having an issue with you want more of us, it's going to have to be a group effort, and reaching out to your representatives and being like, hey, we need more.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. But when it all comes down to it, it wouldn't be so bad if people just got their animals fixed, or kept control over their animals. There's got to be some personal responsibility in this. We cannot do it all. And, we're seriously outnumbered as it is. It's just one of those things where we know it's expensive. There are low-cost options that are opening up very soon. I mean, one of the clinics is already taking appointments. There's been appointments at other clinics. They might not have been in the county, but they were in the neighboring counties. They had them in Okaloosa. They had them in Escambia. They got them in Mobile, Foley. There's options out there. You just, as a good pet owner, have to take that initiative to do it. I took my own dogs to Alabama. I wasn't wanting to be charged $600 and $800 for my animals to get fixed. That's kind of a silly number to me. So I took them to Alabama. It was $140. You just got to find the workaround to get that taken care of, the way it should be done. And if everybody had their animals microchipped, if we find them, we would be bringing them home, not bringing them to the shelter.
Right.
If it's a repeat offender, then we're going to be issuing the citations, for the repeat offense rather than taking the dog into the shelter, because at least we know who it belongs to.
Right. And it's about containment, right? Microchipping
Exactly.
and containment, making sure you have the appropriate space set up so that your animal's not going to get out all the time. I mean, I adopted a Husky Pyrenees mix in the shelter who can almost jump over a 6-foot fence. So that's we've definitely had to be creative with that. And we, with the microchipping, we do, I think, in the next, we don't have all the details yet, but in the next month or so, probably in May or June of 2025, we're going to have a microchip clinic, which will help people get that low cost option, so that they can. I mean, so many people, I don't think, just want to let their dogs run away and then not worry about them. I think so many people are looking for their animals.
When you think about it, I mean, what you've paid for the food for the dog. You've paid for the dog. You've paid for any surgeries or injuries or whatever. You've invested a lot of money and time to get that dog to be your dog. Why not make it to where we can get it back home when it gets lost?
Right.
It's just, aside from the fact that that's your buddy, the last thing you want is them to be out wandering in the woods alone because it's lost, and if we find it, we can scan it, we can get him home faster.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest piece right there. It's just so important, especially, when we get around the 4th of July, or New Year's, when we have the fireworks or bad storms. There's just animals that are going to react poorly, and I would much rather them be safe and in a home rather than scared, without their owner.
Yeah. And the slogan we always go back to, too, is, adopt, don't shop, right? I mean, so often people want to have a purebred dog, or they want to have this kind of breed or this kind of breed. And you actually brought it up on the radio, I think, last week, that we partner with so many different rescues that if you're looking for a German Shepherd, or you're looking for a Beagle, or you're looking for a Bulldog, whatever it is, odds are we can connect you with a rescue that can get you that type of animal that you're looking for, and you're rescuing an animal instead of contributing to the possibly bad breeding situations that's going on across the country. And
a lot of times they're already potty trained, or they're past their chewing stage. There's so many benefits to adopting a rescue that, and typically, mutts are healthier.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have all the genetic anomalies that, these line bred, pretzel-fied dogs come out there, and they look at them and they kind of look like a frog, and you're like, what is wrong with your hips? And you're like, okay, well, it's just bad breeding.
Yeah. That's the other thing is that this is not just a unique to Santa Rosa issue. It's something we hear all the time. We partner with over 100 different rescues across the country, and this is something that's happening everywhere. I mean, overpopulation in shelters truly is happening on a nationwide level, and we're just sort of in a unique spot because we have a lot of space in our county, and then there's these two kind of sections. That's the north end where there's parts that aren't leash law, right?
Right.
And then there's the south end where it's very populated, or there's tourists that are picking up dogs when they don't need to. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Driving them to Texas. We had a yellow lab that a family saw running on the side of the road, and they picked it up and they drove it home with them to Texas, and then posted about it back in the Navarre pages, or is it Navarre or Pensacola, and said, hey, we found a dog. And so then the owner's trying to figure out, how do I get my dog back? Thank God it was a genuine family trying to connect the dots with the owning family. But it was just like, wow, You know, that dog thought it was going for a quick run around the corner and ended up in Texas. So,
Yeah.
and that can happen at any point in time. You know, it's easily done, especially if you got a goofy, lovable animal.
Yeah. So let's do this. When you see an animal, what's the process here? I always tell people that if you're thinking that you're going to pick up an animal to be the good Samaritan, be ready to take care of it. Be ready to foster it for a couple of weeks or whatever it might be. Tell us the process if somebody sees a hurt, a wounded, or just a stray animal kind of walking around. What should be the first thing they should do?
One of the first things would be, snap a picture.
Yeah.
And before you even get out of your car, because a lot of times if you open up your car door, the animal's going to take off and you'll never see it again.
Yeah.
But if you be like, hey, I was on, Avalon and I saw this dog, it was headed north, post it on social media. The owner may actually be out there looking for it. Or us animal control officers, we're not allowed to really, comment a whole lot on these Facebook pages, but we stalk them like none other.
Yeah.
Whenever we find an animal, the first thing we're doing is looking on those pages, seeing who's lost one, and that way we can try to get it home that way. It's not just scoop and run. I'm taking it to the shelter. It's mine now. Ha ha ha. It's not like that at all. It's whatever we can do. We're thinking outside of the box. We're making those posts. There's been times when I get a call in the middle of the night. There was a doodle that had been hit up on 90, and I was already posting about a doodle that was being hit on 90 as I was leaving Midway. So en route, I've already got the wheels are greased before I get there, so that as soon as I got there, I could get a picture and multitask while I'm on my way to Niceville taking it to the ER vet.
Right.
Because you're an army of one after hours, so you just got to get creative, and that's how we do it. Is consulting social media, and then we go from there. Once you see that animal and you snap the picture, call animal control. Because you may actually be in a non-leash law area. We're going to tell you, leave it there because that's where it lives.
Yeah.
Or the other part of it is we're trying to find out, is it injured? Is it aggressive? Does it look emaciated? Tell us a little bit about it. How's it behaving? And then we advise from there. If it's something that maybe we've been looking for and we're going to send an officer right out. Or is it one of those, it's after hours, it's, not doing anything, it's just sitting in somebody's front yard, just chilling. Let it stay there for a little bit, snap a picture, post it on social media, and hopefully the owner sees it.
Yeah.
It's just, we could have 500 kennels and we'd still have 600 dogs. It's just, no matter how many kennels you have, and so many people don't understand that. And it's not because of our lack of action, it's the lack of responsibility by the owner.
Yeah. To me, I think maybe, law enforcement goes through this a lot as well, but trust them. Trust us. You know what I mean? If the animal control officer says there's just nothing we can do, they have a whole book of state statutes and state laws and stuff that they're having to adhere to in the same way that law enforcement does. So sometimes there's things that they can do right away, but sometimes there's the situation is what it is. So I know sometimes it can be a frustrating process, but it's also frustrating that we have to deal with this process in the first place.
Exactly.
So I think the more that we can educate people to take care of their animals, the better. So in review, snap a picture, call us, call the animal control line, spay, neuter, microchip. Those are the most important things. Let's reduce the overpopulation, and hopefully we can learn how we can contain our animals, be responsible adopters, responsible pet owners, so that they're not always getting out and we're not always having this issue. So I know here's the nitty gritty of the episode here. I know that there's been some crazy calls and some crazy stories, even crazy just exotic type animals that people might not have realized that you've run into in Panhandle, Florida. Tell us first. Well, let's do this. Let's do the wildest catch or the wildest case that you've had, and then we'll do the wildest animal that you have.
All right. So the best part about this job is no 2 days is the same.
Yeah.
You never know when you answer that phone or when you get that text from dispatch what you're going into. And for a goofy story, with you being a husky owner, you can appreciate this one. If you ever have to ask the question of what in the world after you read the text, it is almost always a husky issue.
I can see that for sure.
I got a phone call that the dog from the neighbor's house was jumping onto the roof of their house, pooping, jumping back over to the other roof and back inside of its house because it had access to the second story window.
Oh my God.
And I called up dispatch and I was like, please tell me this is a husky. She's like, how did you know? And I was like, that is the most husky thing on the planet.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. But, there's, know your breeds,
Yeah.
because
Oh, Lord.
there's some of them are just notorious. If I have hound dogs, I've got basset hounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Nose on, brain off.
That's what I grew up with beagles. I always wanted a husky. I was very aware of the husky personalities. But still, some of the stuff that she does, her name's Ahsoka. If you're a Star Wars fan, you'll appreciate that. But some of the stuff she does, I'm like, I don't know why you would do this when this great option is right here. I mean, I just don't get. But she's a doll, so I love her. So what about? Okay, of course we're calling out the husky stuff. So what about wildest animals that you've come across?
Well, living in Florida, that affords you some pretty good options.
Yeah.
And
Some big options.
It's a big options. Yeah, I've done the alligator thing. Those are great because anything other than a cat or a dog or a chicken call, that I'll take anything. But I got called out to a emu. I am 5'1", $130 on a good day, and this bird was pretty good size.
Yeah.
And I just so happened, I'm not a fast person, but I was quick that day. I don't know what was in my Wheaties, but I managed to catch up with this bird and get a pillowcase over its head and picked it up like I had the best Heisman pose of the day and had the arm out, the whole deal. And I had its head by the end there, and the legs were just kicking. I'll never be able to do that again.
Oh my God. That's like some Swiss Family Robinson
right?
type
Exactly. I should have had a camera available. Too bad I don't have a GoPro on me, but that would have been a great one. But one of the funny wild catches we had is last year, the year before, the Santa Rosa deputies called us up and said, hey, we have a weird one on somebody's front porch. And we're like, okay. It's in a box. Even better. Okay. We're going to meet you with it. I was like, okay. So they're like, we just got a surprise for you. I meet up with them over on 90, and they're all standing outside of the squad car. And I was like, what's going on, guys? They're like, it's inside. Okay, it was in a box when we talked. They're like, it's not now.
It's no longer.
It's not now. And so they pulled the window down because it's got the bars. And I looked back there, and it was the biggest iguana I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
I had no idea that people had rhinoceros iguanas for pets. I knew that we had regular iguanas, but I had never seen one of those outside of a zoo or National Geographic before in my life. And they were like, aren't you going to use your catch pole? Nope. So I just grabbed my gloves and just made sure I had the tail tucked and grabbed it and brought it back to the shelter. And FWC came out, and now I think it's living at the zoo in Crestview, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's living its best life.
Gosh. Anyone that knows me knows that I don't really mess around with lizards or frogs or snakes. And
my coworkers and all of us, we sit around telling stories, and they've got some really good ones. But it's more one of those things that the deputies here in this area know I'm nuts, and I will jump into a pit of 9 Corsos and on the fly, and that was how I made my name here. Is that's when they were like, hey, give me the crazy chick, and I was like, okay, that's what I do. So there's not much
Kelli.
that I won't jump into and try to tackle one way or the other. So works out.
Well, Kelli, it's been an absolute pleasure. Every time we get the opportunity to do anything together, I'm always
it's fun.
It's always fun to talk about. I appreciate you coming on. Shop Talk Podcast is just a place that we're going to continue to highlight different people. We're going to continue to use it as a platform to educate, and hopefully in a more kind of entertaining way. Hopefully this was entertaining for you. It was certainly entertaining for me.
Definitely.
So I really appreciate you coming on, Kelli.
Thank you.